Well, hey there. You have stumbled into Sister Sharpens Sister, where three sisters get together each week and talk about first one thing and then another.
Welcome to another episode of Sister Sharpens Sister. We are glad that you are here. My name is Karen. I didn't tell you that last week. This is Shalon. That over there,
Me.
that's Dee Dee.
Dee.
We are continuing our discussion about food through the ages in the United States. And today we're going to be talking about the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. And Delina's going to pick up where she left off last week after she finished up with World War II.
Yes. Okay. So we know World War II ended in 1945. So I'm going to take us to 1945 through 1959 just to close that gap. But I want to start by mentioning the slow cooker.
Oh, yes.
It was invented in the 1930s, and started gaining popularity in the 1940s when women started joining the workforce. And it has gained and maintained its popularity since then. It allowed and still allows working people to cook a good, nutritious meal from scratch while the person is away.
Yeah.
It was invented by. Go ahead.
We actually have one running in the kitchen right now. It's got chicken in it.
Oh, I use it. I'm not going to say every week, but I use it often several times a month.
Yeah.
Where was I? Okay, it was invented by Irving Naxon. He patented it in 1940 with the intent of using it to prepare a Jewish stew called cholent.
I'm sorry, called what?
Cholent. And I actually have a recipe for that I'll share with Karen if anybody wants to look at it. And it actually talks about the history of the stew. So
okay.
It was originally called the Naxon Beanery, and he sold his invention to rival manufacturing, who rebranded it the crock pot. So that's where that came from.
In the 70s.
Yeah, well, it happened in the 1940s is when it started, but it continued throughout. And
I have in 1971 that rivaled trademarks the crock pot.
Oh, you're talking about the crock pot part of it? Yeah.
Yeah.
The crock pot started later. So
okay.
That's the one I have.
Okay. Yeah, was the 1971 or the crock pot?
Well, I mean, it's not from 1970, but it's called a crock pot. Is what it says right on the side of it.
Yeah, mine does too. I have a couple of them. I have a smaller one, and then I have a bigger one. So I have two of them. But yeah. Okay, rationing from the war ended in America in 1945, except for sugar that was rationed until 1947.
Oh, really?
Say that many other foods were also in short supply due to the demand for them after there was no longer rationing, and because the U.S. was still helping to provide food for the war-torn countries.
Okay, yeah,
their factories and manufacturing and housing and their fields for growing crops, they were all either neglected or destroyed. So we were helping feed people in Europe.
Right.
Now, eventually, American farmers of produce and animals, as well as manufacturers, caught up with the demand, and the war-torn countries were again able to supply enough food for their people.
Mm-hmm.
That eventually everything got caught up. At that point, Americans began eating meals rich in meat and butter.
Sounds good to me.
Mm-hmm. Now, oh yeah, I like meat and butter. I just want to mention, because I know some people get angry when the United States helps other people. I don't mind when they do it. To me, that's our Christian duty. But if you think we had it bad after the war because we still had foods that were in short supply, rationing did not stop in the UK until the 1950s.
Wow.
And some of the rationing was tighter after the war than it was during the war.
Mm-hmm.
So, because they didn't remove rationing for tea until 1952, eggs, cream, sugar, and sweets, 1953, cheese, butter, cooking oil, meat, and bacon, 1954. So we were providing help for them, but it's not like they were wasting it or just throwing it away. They were rationing it to make sure that people had the food that they needed.
Well, maybe we shouldn't have dumped all that tea in the harbor. It might have kept them from having to ration so hard.
Well, maybe. Back in the day.
She's over here. She said, stop.
Well, you know what they say, hindsight's 20/20, right?
Correct.
So now at this time, grilling in America became the height of entertainment because they wanted steaks, potatoes with butter, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Now, some wartime foods, including some with earlier roots to times of other shortages like the Great Depression, some of them stuck around. like stuffed peppers and cabbage, Kraft macaroni and cheese, and fruit cobblers like peach cobbler.
Mm-hmm.
Now, ground beef was a big choice during the war because it used less rationing stamps. Plus, you could put stuff with the beef like rice or crackers that would help extend the beef.
Mm-hmm.
And ground pork could also be used for the same reason. Canned and other packaged foods were provided to Americans in the 1950s as a way to make their lives easier, and it let the supermarkets offer aisles full of easy to prepare high calorie foods. New products made the want for electricity to boom, which we talked about this already a little bit. The new products included, among others, electric refrigerators with freezer compartments. The fish stick, aka fish fingers, were pioneered in the 1950s. I have found conflicting information about who invented it, so I don't exactly know who did, but the companies that had versions of the fish stick were Gorton's, Gortons. Excuse me. Now, they were eventually bought by General Mills. Mrs. Paul's had some, and Bird's Eye had some fish sticks. I loved fish sticks when I was a kid.
Yeah, I remember.
If my mom wanted me to eat, she'd give me fish sticks, I would eat every single one of them. She would heat them up. I would put butter on them. I like butter on them, and I would eat them up. Now, these were modeled after the hot dog. They were cheap, fast, and easy to prepare. All you needed to do was heat it. Okay. 1954 was when the first full year of production for the Swanson TV dinners occurred. During that first year, they sold 10 million frozen meals.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yes. It was a complete frozen meal that was ready to eat in 25 minutes. Now, it was controversial because the men didn't want their wives serving them the just eat and serve Swanson meal. They wanted their wives to cook like their mamas did, the old-fashioned way from scratch, even though a lot of them were still in the workforce or going into the workforce and were having to cook, clean, take care of the kids, do all the shopping, do all the everything, and work. So it was controversial. The predecessor to the Swanson meal was the Frigid Dinner, Frigidiner. It was created in 1947 by Jack Fisher and was sold to the Navy and to airlines for them to use. And information I found says
I have this picture of women in the 1950s doing what Mrs. Doubtfire did. Ordering the takeout and making it up like you looks like you slaved all day.
Do you remember the Rice Krispies commercial where she's making the Rice Krispie treats? And she's like in the kitchen standing there eating one, but whenever she gives them out to the family, she puts flour or something all over. And it's like,
face.
oh, I've slaved so long.
Yeah. And of course, this was also at the time when Americans started to have more televisions in their homes, making the TV dinner a big hit.
And the TV tray, like that right there. You can see one.
Yeah, we had some when we were kids.
But they were metal.
They were metal, and they had legs that you opened up and you set them in front of you. Here,
right?
TV dinner on it, and you ate while you watched TV.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember. I was alive then. Yeah, I was born a long time ago, man. I was born in the 1900s.
Oh my gosh.
I've had my children use that line on me.
It's funny. In 1950, we have Minute Rice, Kellogg's Sugar Pops, and frozen pizza. There's a patent filed for frozen pizza, and it was granted in 1952. Now, frozen pizza was around in the 1940s, but nobody liked it because the crust would get soggy. But a fellow by the name of Joseph Bucci, Bucci, in Philadelphia came up with a better way to do it, and he did it, and it was popular. 1951, Ore-Ida frozen foods with the frozen potato products, Duck and Heinz cake mix, and Tropicana frozen orange juice. Huh?
Hey,
tater tots. Tater tots.
Yeah. I love tater tots. Are you kidding me?
I do too.
Same.
What do you in 1950? My husband hates tater tots.
Oh,
he hates them.
I didn't think that was possible.
Right? Right?
Yeah. especially those crowns. Is that what they're called? I haven't bought and eaten any in a very long time.
Right, they're flat and circular.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they're not the complete tot. They're like half of the tot, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forget what they're called, but they're
Round.
really good. I prefer that.
Yeah, I think the rounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so in 1952, we have Kraft Cheese Whiz. We have, and this is where some of the controversy comes in. We have Mrs. Paul's Fish Sticks. They say 1952, but then I also found information that said no, Gorton's invented it, or Mr. Kenny invented it in 1953. And I'm like, well, if he invented it in 1953, how did Mrs. Paul's have it in 1952?
Right.
So I found conflicting information, but I don't think it really matters who invented it or marketed it first. All we need to know for this episode is fish sticks became a big hit in the 1950s.
Yeah.
That's it. 1953, Eggo frozen waffles. And we're seeing a lot of prepackaged processed foods now, aren't we?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, 1953, Eggo frozen waffles, Star-Kissed canned tuna, and of course the Swanson TV dinners, which we talked about briefly already. 1954, General Mills Trix, which is a cereal, butterball turkeys. 1955, Kellogg's Special K cereal. McDonald's restaurant was in 1955.
Yeah.
The Car Hop Drive-In was in 1940. Huh?
Yeah.
I said Special K's been around since the 50s.
Yeah, 55, it says here. Yes, yeah.
Wow.
And McDonald's, although they had the Car Hop Drive-In in 1940, the actual restaurant was in 1955. 1956, Imperial Margarine. Mrs. Paul's 4-ounce package of frozen onion rings, which is the first major breaded side item. 1957, Pam nonstick cooking spray. Boil in bag pouches with prepared vegetables. Secret Farms did that. I know why Shalon's laughing. Also in 1957, did I say 1957? Pam nonstick cooking sprays in 1957, as well as the boil-in pouches with the prepared vegetables. And then a company by the name of Patterson Frozen Foods came out with poly bags, which are durable, cost-efficient, and made of plastic, and they're for frozen foods, frozen vegetables. They had private label frozen vegetables in that new type of package. 1958, we have Tang, Rice-A-Roni, Jif peanut butter. 1959, we have Ocean Spray, and Quaker Oats Company comes out with their version of frozen waffles.
Mm.
And I'm sure there's lots more, but those are the highlights and the hits that I got when I did my research. And I also brought up some candies that became popular.
Oh, okay.
And some of them were actually, well, not necessarily popular, but from what I found, they invented them in the 1950s.
Okay.
Now, the website I use is Classic Candies, so there's things in there that are not from the 1950s. So, but since we're no longer in the 1900s, these are classic candies. 1954, Atomic Fireballs.
Oh, wow.
These are not in order. These are not necessarily in chronological order, but 1954 Atomic Fireballs. And if you've never had one in your mouth, they are atomic. 1958, the candy necklace.
Oh, used to love those. You remember getting those as kids?
Yep, I do. Yep. Now, I don't have on here when the candy bracelet came out, but possibly around the same time. I'm not sure. I didn't get that information. 1956. Karen, you remember Certs?
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember certs.
Okay. Yeah, people that don't know, it's kind of like a lifesaver, but not a lifesaver because it's more like chalky. Not really chalky because it wasn't chalky, but it wasn't, I don't know, more like a Tic Tac.
Yeah.
It's a mint.
But only shaped different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's shaped like a lifesaver without the hole.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's more like a Tic Tac. So Fizzy's drink tablets were in the 1950s, and there was controversy with those. They were taken off the market, and then they were bought and put back on, and then taken off again and put back on. And I think you can actually find them now if you want to go looking for them. I think they're out now if you want. It's you put it in your water, and it flavors your water. 1950 hot tamales.
Oh, wow.
Tim loves those things.
Hot
Arnie's
tamale.
is the atomic fireball.
I like fireballs.
Or the little teeny cinnamon disc things that you can get.
Uh-huh.
He
Uh-huh.
likes those too.
1954, peanut M&Ms.
Mm.
Now, I don't eat M&Ms often, but if I'm going to eat M&Ms, those are the ones I
Yeah.
want.
Mm-hmm.
In 1952, Pez was brought to America from Austria. Had been in Austria for quite a while, but in 1952, when Pez got here. 1959, Pixie Sticks was trademarked.
Oh man.
I love pixie sticks. You remember getting the very large plastic
Big
ones, right? And you would do it so much that the end of it would get clogged up and you'd have to cut it off to get to the rest of the candy.
Yeah, it was troublesome. Was as a child.
Yeah.
Whoa, what we had to go through when we were kids, right? And just an FYI, that after Halloween in 1950, there was a rash of reports where children had become ill after consuming candy. An investigation traced the illness to consumption of candy that contained orange number 1, which led to it being banned.
Wow.
Orange number 1.
But they won't ban Red 40 nowadays.
Right.
Yeah, so that's what I have. I mean, most of the history lesson was in the last episode that gave us everything that was necessary for the American diet to move to where it is now, including the war and the rationing and the electricity and the automobiles and things as such.
Right.
So,
well, that moves us into the 1960s, and that's what I've got. And one thing to note here, and it's going to be important for the next episode when we hit the 80s, is to pay attention to the advent of all the additives that are going to be in the foods that we're mentioning and talking about. So in the 1960s, we come into the junk food era. Sugary cereals had staked their claim as the number one breakfast item across the United States. Now, you mentioned fast food. You mentioned McDonald's in the 55, I think you said?
55.
I didn't go into any dates about brands of fast food and when they started, but the very first drive-through happened in Springfield, Missouri in 1947 at a restaurant called Red's Giant Hamburg. No ER on the end of that. But more and more households where, you had two-income family, you had people who had extra spending money. People were traveling more, going greater distances because of the advent of the interstate and all the things going with the road. It was easier to go from, I don't know, California to Illinois if you wanted to. So fast food chains latched on to his idea of a drive-through window. Now, Wendy's didn't start until 1969, but their claim to fame in 1969 was that every restaurant they built had a drive-through window. And by the 70s, drive-throughs were replacing drive-ins. Now, if anybody doesn't know what a drive-in restaurant is,
it's like Sonic.
Right. It's like Sonic.
Yeah.
Where you drive into a spot and as opposed to Sonic, you actually order from like an automated thing. At a drive-in, you order from a person. Now, Delina and I, oh my gosh, 2 weekends a month, we would always go to the shanty. You remember that?
Yep.
Going up and we'd get a hot dog. You would get a hot dog. I would get a chili dog. Which it wasn't a chili dog. It was chili on the bun with no weenie. That's what I got. But it was a drive-in.
Yeah, you drive in, you blink your lights, they come out, they take your order, they got this tray they put on your window it's a metal tray, but it's all covered in plastic or rubber.
Rubber at that time, yeah.
Yeah, and then they put it on your window and you reach out and you get it and you give it to your family and you enjoy your meal in your vehicle.
Right, in the vehicle. And it wasn't until just probably a year ago one of the longest standing drive-in restaurants in West Virginia closed.
Mhm.
And it was just right here at the end of my street. It was King Tut
Mhm.
Drive-In.
How about that?
Closed. They actually tore the building down.
Wow.
So it is not even there anymore. But I mean, they had things beyond hot dogs and hamburgers, because you could get fried chicken and meatloaf and roast beef, and they had all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's a little tidbit of information. Coca-Cola invented the first coupon. Are you ready for this? 1887.
Wow.
Okay. And it was instantly a success for Coca-Cola. But it wasn't popular widely across the United States until the 1950s, when the Nielsen Coupon Clearinghouse was established. And what that did was that it authenticated coupons. Because up until that time, if you had a typewriter and if you were a pretty good counterfeiter, you could counterfeit coupons for items. And restaurants and businesses had no way of knowing whether or not it was an actual coupon from the company.
Right.
Until this Nielsen house came about. Now, in 1968, and this is why I did a little bit on the coupon, in 1968, something called the VALPAK, VALPAK, Neighborhood Savings Booklet came out. And it was started by a guy by the name of Terry Loebel. I think that's how you say his name. Loebel. He was an unemployed auto worker in the 60s who turned a $500 loan into a company that eventually franchised in Clearwater, Florida. And what he did was that he took that $500 and he would mail coupons to the Clearwater, Florida area and the surrounding locations. And the first newspaper coupon insert was in 1972 in some Michigan newspaper. The article I was reading didn't cite which one it was. And Target took the coupon digital in 2010 by making a scannable coupon on a smartphone. So
yeah, when I do my research, I couldn't, nothing came up in my research talking about coupons, and I did not even think about it, but the soft drinks were starting to come about.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But when I did my research, I don't know why it did not bring up Pepsi or Coke or anything like that. For some reason, it didn't bring it up. So I don't know if they just weren't real popular, maybe. I don't know.
Well, so in the mid 60s, there was a shift. We went from women who were shaped and looked like women, voluptuous, that's a good word,
Voluptuous, yeah.
to everybody was chasing the fashion icon Twiggy.
Appropriately named.
Right. And she actually got that name because people were making fun of her because of how she was built. Her nickname was Twig. Think like a stick, right? Now, her boyfriend at the time, who was actually a pretty well-known photographer, is the one that started calling her Twiggy, and it just stuck. Now, her name is actually Leslie Lawson. And she's written books and she's appeared on TV shows, and she still models for a couple of companies. But the rage was to become just as beautiful, just as androgynous, because that was one of the big appeals for people from her, was that depending on the shot from the photographer, you couldn't tell whether she was a boy or a girl. Now, she didn't start her career at, I guess I would call it a normal age for somebody to start a career as a model.
Okay.
She was 16.
Okay.
That's about normal, actually.
Yeah, but she was a teenager, and there were women all across the United States and the world eventually, because she's from England, by the way, for anybody that doesn't know, who were chasing the body image of a teenager.
They didn't know how old she was.
Yeah, that's true. And I know 16 may not have been the normal age for that type of career, at that time. Whereas
Right.
now it's probably an appropriate age, but back then it may not have been. the
Now it
appropriate
sounds
age.
normal.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that started the jump of the fad diet. So I have a list of the most popular diets through the 60s. So in 1960, the most popular diet was the cabbage soup diet. And it had been around for a while, but it had a resurgence of popularity among housewives in 1960. And it did help you lose weight, but most of the weight was water. And the side effects that would happen because of that were like dizziness and fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1961, you had something called Sego, S-E-G-O. And that is a precursor to what we now know as Slim Fast. It was a meal replacement drink described as baby formula mixed with water. I mean, that just sounds yummy.
Yeah, right.
Here are the flavors. Okay. Chocolate coconut, chocolate malt, vanilla, strawberry, banana, and orange. Each can was 10 ounces and held 225 calories. And the diet for this was to have 4 of those a day, which is 900 calories in a day.
And that's all? Eat nothing else? I mean, eat nothing?
Yeah, that was
900 calories.
900 calories. And all you were drinking was that meal replacement. But in 1961, there were already over 100 meal replacement products in the United States marketplace.
Yeah.
Yes. But everything got superseded by Slim Fast, and they came out in 1977. Now, in 1962, there was a book by an author called Helen Gurley Brown. And the book was called Sex and the Single Girl. That was the most popular thing for people to do, because in this book, she told about a diet. And the diet was supposed to make you feel sexy, exuberant, and full of joie de vivre, which is French for exuberant enjoyment of life. Now, this lady would eventually become the editor of Cosmopolitan.
Mm-hmm.
Right? All right, here's the diet. You ready for this?
No.
Breakfast, 1 egg with a glass of white wine. Lunch.
Maybe I am ready for this.
Yeah, right.
All right, here's lunch.
I mean, that's not even a mimosa. That's actual wine.
Wine, yeah. No orange juice. All right. Lunch. You would add an egg and have a glass of white wine. So 2 eggs and a glass of white wine.
No wonder you felt so good.
No.
All right. Dinner was steak smothered in butter, and you were supposed to finish off the white wine.
The bottle?
Yes.
A bottle of wine a day.
Yes.
Oh, that's funny.
And that
That was
was
a popular one, wasn't it?
yes, it was very popular. And actually, I think this diet had a resurgence in like 2018.
Really?
Yeah. But if you eggs and steak, what does that sound like?
That's protein diet.
That's carnivore
So,
almost.
Yeah.
So in 1963, Weight Watchers.
Mm-hmm.
Weight Watchers was started by an overweight housewife in 1963. They actually, she started it in 1961 and was so successful in the way that she lost weight that she started teaching people in her home and in her community. And eventually in 1963, they went public with the company Weight Watchers. And it's still one of the most popular weight loss brands known today across the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In 1964, the diet was to get rid of sugar in your drinks. So guess what we have in 1964? Dee Dee's familiar with this soft drink, Tab.
Tab.
Yep. Tab and Diet Pepsi. So 1964 is the year that artificial sweeteners came to cola.
Mm-hmm.
And you were supposed to swap that out for a regular soda. Now, in 1965 and 1966, there was a diet that got popular called the drinking man's diet. Ready?
Drinking man. Okay.
A low carb diet with a sexist twist. Because what it called for was eating manly proteins like steak and lobster and a ton of alcohol. Why they throw in alcohol, I don't know. But that was the diet for those 2 years. Now in I'm sorry, what?
I said, oh, okay.
Yeah, it sounds like the sex and the single girl diet, but just
yeah, it's the man's version of it.
Right. They're not drinking wine, they're drinking Jack Daniels, I guess. I don't know what they were drinking.
Yeah.
Whiskey.
They're drinking whiskey, bourbon.
Yes.
In 1967, we have something called the Stillman diet. And if you think Atkins, you'll know what the Stillman diet is. It is a low carb, lean protein diet.
Do they have alcohol?
It doesn't mention alcohol, but it does say that you are supposed to have lean cuts of meat and low fat dairy products. Now, in 1968, diet pills overtake everything else and become the new diet shake. And as early as January of 1968, Life magazine was publishing articles talking about how bad diet pills were for you. But it didn't matter because people still wanted them. And new medications kept coming out, so people kept asking for them. And in 1969, you have the grapefruit diet. That goes all the way back to 1969. I'm not saying you're old or anything, Dee Dee, but
I am old. I was born all the way back in the 1900s.
Same. But the grapefruit diet was that you were supposed to have a grapefruit at every meal, or even have grapefruit as your meal.
Okay.
And that is diet through the 1960s. Now, all right, so that finished me for the 60s, and now Shalon has the 70s.
I have the 1970s. So now, since the machine that is becoming the American diet is working, a lot of what I have is there's a couple of big things, but then there's also just little tidbits of information like Orville Redenbacher gourmet popcorn came out in 1970.
Oh, Jiffy Pop. When did that one come out?
Oh, I don't know. Is that a 50s?
I don't know, but man.
1959.
Yeah.
That didn't come up in my research, but that's interesting to know.
Also in 1970 brought us Hamburger Helper. And who hasn't used Hamburger Helper?
Right.
And also the
resealable.
You haven't. Shush. Resealable bags became a thing in 1970.
So like Ziploc. Okay.
Well, it just the website that I had, greensboro.com, just had resealable bags.
Okay.
It didn't say Ziploc.
Right. I mean, I know Ziploc is a brand, but to me, every bag that seals is a Ziploc. Just like every hook and loop tape is Velcro.
1971, Starbucks was founded in Pike Place Market in Seattle. But didn't go public until the 90s.
Okay.
So people in Seattle have been enjoying Starbucks long before everybody else.
It's probably better then.
We also had the nation's first salad bar, which opened in a restaurant in Chicago. And the Quarter Pounder was introduced by McDonald's in 1971. In 1972, Celestial Seasonings herbal teas were introduced.
Okay. Yeah, I like those.
Now, I know you've drank those.
I do too. Oh yeah, those I've done. I have some of those now that I've drank. So yeah.
Yeah.
All right. In 1973, McDonald's introduces the Egg McMuffin. And
Now wait a minute. Is that the one that's on a
English
English muffin.
English muffin? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And in 1973, Clorox buys Hidden Valley dressing.
Bleach buys salad dressing.
Bet you didn't know that.
No, I didn't.
Yep.
Hmm.
All right. 1974 brought us a few things. It brought us Yoplait yogurt,
Mm.
Miller Lite, which was the first light beer.
Really?
Yep. And Mrs. Fields cookies. And in 1975, maybe the reason why you guys didn't have a lot of soda show up in your research. In 1975 is when soft drink consumption surpasses coffee in the United
Oh,
States.
really?
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
In 1978, Ben and Jerry's opens up in
Oh.
Vermont.
That is by far my favorite ice cream.
Oh, really?
By far, yes. Ben and Jerry's. Guess what flavor?
Everything but the kitchen sink.
Chunky,
Chunky
monkey.
monkey.
That's my favorite.
All right. Now, I also looked up the diets of the 70s, and the one that came up the most in the 70s was the grapefruit diet, which you had already mentioned.
Yeah, well, it started in 1969, so I could see how it would roll over.
And the claim was that it burned fat.
Yeah, and I remember hearing that. I'm sure Dee Dee does too.
Yeah.
Because we had family members that did the grapefruit diet.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember hearing the women talk about it when we were little girls.
Yeah.
They would talk about dieting and watching their weight, and I don't recall ever thinking any of them were fat, but I was a kid at the time, so
Same.
everybody wanted to be skinnier than they were, I guess. So like now.
Yeah. Okay. Also, we have. Now, I didn't go into extreme detail of these two facts that I have, because these things don't really start picking up until we get into the 90s and the 2000s and today with mainstream America. But in 73? Yes, 1973, biochemist Herbert Boyer and Stanley Cohen developed genetic engineering, GMOs.
Now, if you could go back in time and stop their research, would you do it?
I think that there is a place for something like this,
Okay.
but it might not be in our food.
Okay.
Okay. And then it also in the 70s is a organic food movement where people are trying to get back to.
I remember that too.
Yeah, people are trying to get back to, homegrown gardens and farmers markets, and the hippie lifestyle is something that I saw a lot of.
Yeah.
So trying to get back to natural and everything.
Peace.
Yeah.
Peace. All right. And also in 1974, we were introduced the first food pyramid.
Ooh, really?
Yes. And it was presented to the public with the message, a good, healthy diet at a reasonable price.
Huh?
I think they had advertisements on television with that in it.
They did. They did. I remember learning about the food pyramid in school.
Yeah.
Oh, I certainly did.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm pretty sure I remember some television commercials when Karen and I were little girls.
Haven't we talked in the past a little bit about the food pyramid being a scheme from
Big Ag?
Yeah, for grains to be
Grain.
sold, because the bottom, like the widest portion, is breads and yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that grain is not necessarily bad, it's how it's processed.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And most things are okay in moderation.
Yeah.
Indeed, yes.
You know,
Yes.
people like to bring up and says, well, Jesus says he's the bread of life. And I like to say, yes, but he's not Wonder Bread. He's more like
Not
whole
bunny bread
grain.
either.
It's all grain.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot. All right. And then I also, since somebody mentioned candy,
That was Dee Dee.
that was Dee Dee.
I
Dee
talked
Dee
a little bit
mentioned
about
That was
candy.
Dee Dee. I didn't look up any candy. I mean, you know, candy could be a whole separate episode. So could soda, for that matter.
Really could, but I looked up a few
Yeah. Yeah.
here. I took a little screenshot. Popular candies that came about in the 1970s were bottle caps.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Dee Dee, do you remember the candy cards that used to come around in elementary school?
Aw.
Mhm.
The lady would come around with the candy
Okay.
card to each room. And if you had change after paying for your lunch, you could get a treat.
That's like Harry Potter and the trolley.
Yes, very much like that.
But that changed when I got there to being quote unquote snack time because I had no
Right.
snacks. So they
Yeah.
started having a snack cart instead of a candy cart.
Right.
So we could get like nabs and chips and even like milk, chocolate milk and juice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember juice being on there. Grape juice went quick, man. It was quick off that cart. Grape juice was.
I never had this when I was in school. I never had a snack time.
Really?
Really. I remember one snack
Well,
time
that's
in
a shame.
kindergarten, but then when I went to Florida, no snacks whatsoever.
Oh, that's right. You switched states.
Yeah. I went
Yeah,
Okay.
you did. Yeah.
and it was breakfast and then lunch and then gone. We weren't allowed to have anything like that.
No, we didn't have breakfast in school, did we?
Yeah.
Do you remember? We
No, well,
there's no
they
breakfast
started bringing
school.
in breakfast when we were in middle school.
Right.
When we were in middle school, or when I was in middle school, you may have gone to high school.
I was
already
in
by
high
the
school,
time
yeah.
Well, that makes
when
sense.
they started serving breakfast at school.
I was born when y'all were in middle school, so
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Other candies, jelly beans.
Wait.
It was it Jelly Belly? Yeah, Jelly Belly.
Oh, Jelly Belly.
In
Okay.
1976, Jelly Belly.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay. So the brand Jelly Belly.
right. Blow Pops,
Oh, I remember blow pops.
they're still a thing.
How many licks does it take to get to the middle of a blow pop?
No, that's a Tootsie Pop.
That's a Tootsie Pop with a Tootsie Roll in the center.
Oh, was it a Tootsie Pop? Let's see. I never ate candy, so I can't get it
Yeah,
straight. Sorry.
blow pop is the one that had bubble
Bubble
gum in
gum.
the center.
Yeah. Fun Dip,
Oh, okay.
Fun Dip.
Fun Dip.
We used to get Fun Dip, Dee Dee. We would have Fun Dip
Yeah.
and Jiffy
Occasionally,
Pop.
mother would she would let me have it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pop Rocks.
Yeah. You remember Pop
I
Rocks?
remember that.
And I remember the controversy going around that if you had Pop Rocks at a
And
Coke,
a soda.
it would make your stomach explode.
Yes.
Yeah.
That even went around
Yeah.
when I was a kid.
And you know what they're doing now is the
Yeah.
Sprite challenge,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Where you try to chug, what is it, a 2 liter of, no,
No, it's
Uh,
just like a 16
a
ounce of
16
Sprite.
or 20 ounce bottle of Sprite
Yeah.
without belching.
But then people do it and then these
They throw up.
demonic belches come out of
Oh
people.
gosh, yeah. It's
Some of them are kinda
hilarious.
funny. In 1975, we have the York Peppermint Patty,
Mm,
the Everlasting Gobstoppers, Ring Pops.
this is in 75.
This is Ring Pops for 76.
Okay.
In
We're
1970,
adding to the jewelry of the necklace.
yeah, that's right.
So I have a necklace, a bracelet, and a ring.
Ring Pop.
That's funny.
All right, 1978, Reese's Pieces.
Oh man. Reese Pieces is the best Reese's. Changed my
Oh.
mind.
Reese's Pieces and popcorn.
Oh girl. Best thing at the movie theater.
1978.
Potato chips and popcorn.
Yes, potato chips and
Potato
popcorn.
chips and popcorn.
I've even got Tim doing that.
Potato chips and chocolate ice cream.
Well, that's like French fries and a Frosty.
Mm-hmm.
All right, 1978.
Yeah.
Whatchamacallit?
I remember that bar.
And then 1979,
Yeah.
1979 is Twix.
Ooh, I thought Twix was older than that.
No? Well,
Yes.
I'll send you the
I do
website
too.
with the
And it was not.
information. All right, some other tidbits of information that I picked up about the 1970s was the overall obesity rate in 1970 was 15% of adults and 5% of children. I also came across an article that said that anorexia and bulimia really start to escalate in the 1970s.
Yeah.
And in the 1970s, 43% of the women in the US are in the workforce.
Wow.
So that also coincides with all these demands of easier food,
Right.
fast dinners, things to fix like that. Because
Right. And more shelf
shelf
stable. Right.
Mhm.
So that
Yeah.
brings in a lot of the additives and chemicals that are required to make that shelf stable. Again, the
Mhm.
100-year-old Twinkie
Right.
myth, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
And then I also came across a statistic that said in 1970, the average American would take in 87 grams of sugar a day.
So how much is it now?
Well, we're not there yet.
All right. No, wait.
I started talking and I got hot.
All right. She's been running around here all day complaining about how cold she is.
I've been freezing all day.
So how much sugar? The average American adult, teenage, and child consumes about 17 teaspoons of added sugar a day.
Okay, this didn't distinguish added sugar because in the 1970s, we still weren't doing a lot of that. Because it wasn't until the 80s that
32.
like Coca-Cola and Pepsi started adding, high fructose corn syrup into their recipes.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. Okay. We will have to do that.
We gotta dig into that one. But
So next episode, we'll find out how much sugar people are consuming in the 80s. So in the 70s, we have, what did you say?
I had 87 grams, but
We'll verify that.
yes.
All right.
What's it say?
It says in 1970, we ate 123 pounds of sugar per year. Today, the average American eats 152 pounds of sugar per year. And that is from the Department of Health and Human Services.
Yes. And I think with the food pyramid coming out in the 70s and the way they stack it and the way they teach it in schools, you start to see this overconsumption of the grains.
Yes.
Which, carbs turn to sugar in your body if you don't use them.
Right. And you got to think about the added sugar that
And
they
then-
put into bread too, because Wonder
Yes.
Bread is the number is like way high for the amount of added sugar into a bread.
Yes. And then coming into the 80s, well, we see in the 70s a shift where soda becomes the number one consumed drink. And then into the 80s where we start having those added sugars, which
Right.
is adding to where we're going with the obesity rates.
Right. And when did Starbucks start spreading?
In the 90s, it became public. 1994, I think it said.
Right. So it became public on the stock market, maybe?
I think maybe.
Public trade. So, but they actually started having more stores through the 80s, and everybody knows what a Starbucks drink is like.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
I
I can see that.
Yeah, and it's a thing too. Like even my children, I have a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old. Starbucks is very popular.
Yeah.
Very popular.
They like the pink one.
Well, no, but then they also like finding all these different recipes.
Oh, yeah.
And then going in and asking the baristas, can you do a light ice, cold foam, blah, 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 and it's like I look at the woman and I'm like, I'm so sorry. I will give you like a 50% tip. It's insane what they find.
What do they call that? The hidden menu?
Yes.
You can actually go in there and ask for something specific, and it becomes the Harry Potter butterbeer.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. If they have the flavoring, some Starbucks, they don't have certain flavorings.
Right. It's like a
but
butterscotch or something that they use.
Yeah.
So it's wild. I'm just now noticing Delina and I have the same color shirt on.
Yeah, I noticed that when we first connected.
Well, of course you did.
I didn't get the green memo. My pants are green.
Yeah, her pants are. Look, it matches my shirt really well.
I still have my church shirt on.
What are you looking at, Dee Dee?
That's all I had from the 70s.
I'm trying to find some information about the sugar consumption of Americans in the 1950s. And I'm having a hard time finding anything that talks specifically about it. But I did find something that said that sugar consumption wasn't considered bad. So they may not have monitored it, at least not the way they started doing it later on.
Right. And
Yes.
that was what
So
I was
don't
just
know
getting
how
ready
much
to
sugar
say.
people were consuming. Yeah.
It's
So,
not,
and
it can't
if you
be
consider
anywhere
that
near
Americans were, I'm sure it wasn't. Not to mention, well, I mean, probably I know for a fact it was more than they were consuming during the war because they was greatly rationed in the war until 47. But I'm sure they started eating more sweets and drinking some of the sodas and stuff like that, but nowhere near like it is now.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what I was trying to find, but I kept hitting a bit of a roadblock there. So
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that we would have been tracking that at that point in time.
no, it didn't look like it. Like I said, I didn't find anything other than it saying that it wasn't considered a bad thing, and it was even advertised as being a good energy source for your children.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's like what do you do for your kids when they have a toothache in 1940? Is that you slather their gums in whiskey.
right. That'll make them stop complaining about that toothache.
Right. Well,
Hey, I mean, the cough syrup that mother makes is bourbon and honey.
Yeah. Robitussin used to have alcohol in it, Dee Dee. You remember that?
Correct. I did find the popular sodas, most popular sodas or soft drinks in the U.S. 1950s.
Okay.
RC Cola, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, root beer, 7-Up, Bubble Up, which I've never heard of, but it's in there, Squirt, and Fresca. And car hop drive-ins as well as diners were very popular in the 1950s.
Yeah. This is my dog. This is the one that goes ape crap when I come home after being gone. And you see where he is. You little traitor. Yeah, you little traitor. You're just an instigator.
He's such a good boy. Yes, you are.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead and say it.
All right. Well, that's all I had for the 1970s. So not get whacked in the face with the tail.
All right. Now, next week, we're going to be talking about the 80s. Are we going to go into the 90s as well, or do you just want to do the 80s? Because I think we could split up the 80s into a few different categories to cover.
Yeah, because we're moving into a period of when we're having like extremely processed foods and things like that. So we need to probably start dividing up a single decade between us.
Yeah, so that's what we'll do next week. Next week, we're just going to cover the 80s, and we'll talk about a lot that happened in the 80s as far as the American diet is concerned.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the question. And this question has been on my mind for more than a year. Is that as a Christian, I know what and how I should eat, and what I should drink, and how I should be doing both of those things. So when I don't do that, would that sin weigh as much as a sexual sin? Because the Bible talks about sexual sin being the most vicious thing that you could do to your body and your spirit. right? So
Mhm.
because the way that we eat affects our bodies, is it a sin? Is it a sin to eat Cheetos? Right? Is it a sin to eat Ben and Jerry's ice cream?
Okay, wait. Here's my opinion on this. Your food becomes a sin when you run to it before you run to God to comfort you.
Mhm.
That's
That
what
is one important thing. And I think giving yourself treats are fine.
yes, because I mean, it says in Psalms, taste and see that the Lord is good. So he does give us good things. Yes, I know, but he didn't give us Twinkies.
Right.
Right. No.
So now this is,
No,
I
God.
think about this too, because this is what it says in James. If you are to be a true religious person, to love the widows and orphans, and to not let yourself be corrupt by the world.
Right.
I think that some of the food is the food porn, as they call it, because it is so adulterated
Yes.
that it's so harmful to you. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's addictive. It's an addiction.
Yes, absolutely. And the companies know that. They know what they're doing.
So yeah.
That topic is something that we should dive into a little bit deeper.
Oh, for sure.
Because not only do I think it can help other people, I know that it could help me.
And me, I run to food a lot.
So we'll do that. Okay.
Yeah.
One good thing came out of
Rocking with the 80s.
You did.
You did.
That is awesome. All right. Dee Dee, we'll talk to you next week. See you next week. Talk to you in in chat.
Okay.
All right. I love you.
Okay. Love you. Bye.
Oh, where's the exit button? Oh, he's ready to go.
Thanks for joining us on Sister Sharpens Sister. We certainly appreciate you. And if you could, like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell. We'll talk to you next week. Bye.